I'm not always optimistic, Don, but I feel pretty good going into this game. Not saying I'm predicting an Iowa win, but let me just start with this, and I think this is a pretty modest prediction. I don't think we're going to see a result like we saw 2 years ago when Iowa went to Columbus. Maybe we can start there, Don. That was a game in which Iowa's defense did everything it could, especially early, but without any semblance of an offense. Eventually, the dam broke, and the route was on. I don't think we're going to see that, primarily because I think Iowa's got a better play caller in place and certainly a better run game. Who knows how effective it will be against a real test in Ohio State. But would you agree with that statement, that prediction, that this is not going to look like 2022?
Yeah. I'd be very surprised if that happens. Now, the only game I've really watched closely was the Michigan State game. The 3 non-conference games were not very difficult, let's say, to be kind. So they really weren't tested at all then. And then the other day when they played last Saturday night, the Michigan State coach commented after the game. Here's what he said. He said, "We were not overwhelmed tonight. We just made too many mistakes, too many self-inflicted wounds. And that's why we lost in the way that we did. It was a one-sided game, of course. But truthfully, Michigan State had great chances, any number of chances to make it a really tight game for a long time, and they simply didn't get it done. They played a pretty sloppy game, and they paid for it. Having said that, Ohio State dominated in all kinds of areas. Just to give you an idea, Ohio State versus Michigan State, of the top 15 parameters that relate to winning, they won 14 of them. And you might say, well, that means Michigan State won 1. No, that was a tie. So they were 0 for 15. In some cases, it was close, but in other cases, not so close. They were outgained 2-1 on total offense. Ohio State was +2 on turnovers. Good luck overcoming that. Ohio State was very efficient in the red zone, 5 for 5, and I believe they were all touchdowns, as I recall. Michigan State, on the other hand, was 1 out of 3 in the red zone, and that cost them dearly. Did you see the game, Corey, or have you seen the condensed version?
Yep, I watched the game on Peacock.
Well, with your permission, I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit here just to be sure I get everything in chronological order.
Sure.
They started the game. Ohio State, it seemed like a big part of their initial plan was to run a lot of horizontal passes away from a fake and back. So if you can envision, they're faking run left and throwing a quick throw, a high percentage throw into the opposite flat. And they had very modest success doing it. Maybe their thought was that we're going to slow down their pursuit early on. So our initial action is always going to be incorrect. That's a good way to slow down pursuit, of course. But they had modest results doing it. Anyway, the way the game went, they had a field goal early. They stalled out and kicked a field goal. And as you know, Michigan State comes back down the field, and now they got 4th and 1 on the plus 20-yard line. They passed up a field goal, even though it was a chip shot. In today's modern age, a chip shot of 38 yards. And all they came up with was a sneak, and they gained absolutely nothing on the sneak. So I really question that strategy. If you're down 3-0, and they're playing at home, of course, why wouldn't you at least? I know the mindset might have been we gotta be really bold with our decision making. But I would say when you're playing the number 3 team in the country, just get on the board and tie them up again. Because you haven't proven to me that you're very good in short yardage anyway. So that cost them. Could have had a tie game at that point. Did not. Other observations early on, the backs run hard, as you know. They're good backs. They don't only run hard, they even pass protect well. They're tough guys, strong runners. The receivers are very slippery, especially 2 of them, as you know. And one priority, I'm sure we've worked a lot to improve our tackling. I'm sure it's been emphasized. We cannot afford to miss tackles as we did against recent opponents.
And some of them, let me just add, a couple of Iowa's better players missed multiple tackles in that game.
That's true. So it wasn't just our last game against Minnesota. I go back to Troy also. We missed some tackles there. So we got to tackle well. I'm sure they practiced a lot just with fundamental tackling for them. And I think that's another reason, Corey, you're more likely to see a lot of zone coverage out of us. Two reasons. You got to be able to eliminate the big plays. And I think in defending the run game, that's our best chance, is to have 11 sets of eyes toward the ball and be able to maintain leverage on the ball and never give it back a two-way go. In other words, we got one guy with inside leverage, another guy with outside leverage. We're going to make a Buckeye sandwich out of that ball carrier with a little bit of luck. But that's one reason we'll play more zone. The other reason is obvious. If we play a lot of man, we're really at risk for individual matchups. Ibuka's really good. The freshman plays like he's a senior right now.
Jeremiah Smith's the best player on that team. I mean, I know
Smith he's a phenom.
He is.
He really is. So we have our hands full with those guys, and again, we don't want to get isolated one-on-one with those receivers, or if so, it's simply that we're in off coverage and it's still zone defense, which means we still have good run support. So that comes to mind. The way the game goes along, how about this for a setup? This is a play that went in Ohio State's favor, and I did read somewhere on social media where it really was a bad call. I'd be inclined to agree based on what I saw. Ohio State is second and goal at the 3-yard line. Plus 3-yard line, they run a whip route to Ibuka. The ball's ruled incomplete. You remember the play, Corey? This is in the first half. Could have easily been ruled as a fumble, but they said he never possessed it, so it was incomplete. Incidentally, that ball in the end zone was recovered by Michigan State. But the officials' ruling of it being an incomplete pass did hold up. That was without a doubt in favor of Ohio State, because 2 plays later they scored a touchdown. Incidentally, on 3rd and goal, 1 play later, the ball was dropped by Michigan State in the end zone. Easy play. That's why they play defense and they can't catch, right? You've heard that old adage. So that's another lost opportunity on consecutive plays. And finally, on 4th and goal, they do throw a touchdown pass. That's 10-0. My next comment I mentioned is OSU looks vulnerable on defense. I felt that way. I felt that way in some other weeks that I've seen them in places. And it was asked this way by Pat Hardy. Coach, let's just talk about the front 7. Am I wrong to say the front 7 is nothing special? Maybe certainly average or even a little above average compared to the conference. But they're not great in the front 7. And I said, I can see why you might say that, because I have seen teams move the ball on them. You might recall Marshall moved the ball on them pretty effectively, especially in the first half. So whatever the case might be, I do think we have a chance to run the ball. Let's face it, we have to be able to, because if we have to play without a running game, we're in a huge dark and evil place. We don't want that to happen. We'll hope that we're running the ball against zone defense so that the box is not so heavy. But at some point in time, and I say they're going to do this because they did it against Michigan State in the second half, at some point in time, they said, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and outnumber you, and we're going to play man, and we're going to dare you to throw. If we're moving the ball effectively, that's what they're going to do. They're going to turn to that, and they won't wait around too long to do it, because they don't want Caleb Johnson to be running up and down the field, not to mention Patterson. So if they have to load the box, they'll do it. And they'll do it with some confidence, because I'm sure they feel like they'll match up just fine. And at that point, I would mention it would behoove us to have, we don't have to just call them willy-nilly, but we have to have them available. And you've heard me talk before about man beaters. We have to have some good plays designed, not just to defeat man coverage, but to scare them out of man coverage. Because if we can't get them out of it, once they're in it, then why would they bother to change? Now, one other comment, though, which you'll find interesting, and this will probably make some sense to you, Corey. If you play man coverage, of course, if you load the box, typically it's man free. The free safety will be very deep, You can't even see him on the television screen a lot of the time. He's 15, 18, even maybe 20 yards deep. And you might recall a lot of Caleb's long runs, some of them have actually been against a heavy front. But with the man coverage, of course, you can run off the outside defenders with your wide receivers. They don't even really have to block them. They can just run them away from where the ball is going. And, of course, the only guy that has a good shot at a running back in the open field is the free safety. Once we do clear that front, then they're running out of people in a short amount of time. And I like Caleb's chances against the free safety, even though he's an outstanding player. I believe. Now, which safety does he play? I'm talking about the guy from Alabama. And I don't have his name right in front of me, but I got it written down. Bear with me. Caleb Downs. He's either a strong or free safety. I'm not sure which. But he was the SEC Freshman of the Year last year. He's transferred from Alabama. He's a big hitter. I don't know that he's a sure tackler. He simply hadn't had that many opportunities to tackle. But I suspect he might be the free safety. Maybe he's as strong. I didn't really notice. Haven't had a chance to go back and look at it. But even if it is Caleb Downs, it's still not easy to get an athlete like Caleb down in the open field. It's kind of nice if you have help from another defender. And as you already know, Corey, a lot of guys have been surprised with Caleb's speed, deceptive stride length, and it means he's a little faster than what he appears to be. And some guys are taking poor angles, as you know. And that's how we end up with big plays sometimes. So even if they are loading the box, let's face it, just because they put in one more tackler than we have blockers, the tackler still has to find a way to get to the ball. And he's got to sort through our players and his players sometimes to get there. It depends on where the ball's hitting, of course. But the bottom line, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to eliminate explosive plays in the run game. It does give you a much better chance to hold the rushing game to +1, +2, +3. You should eliminate a lot of +6s, 7s, and 8s with that extra tackler. And you should discourage a lot of run plays, of course, because you're kind of daring another team to throw. And if they're very capable with their pass offense, they're happy to oblige. We used to love to play teams that would play man coverage because, as you know, we had a history of being able to get to them. But you have to have a lot of man beaters to be able to do it. You don't want to run out of plays. That'll give you the kind of advantage you need.
I'll be releasing my personal preview tomorrow on the channel. But any final words on the matchup against Ohio State and maybe some keys to victory?
Well, my priorities for the game, Ohio State is so capable. They love to hit you over the head with explosive plays. Now, part of their problem on Saturday, Iowa happens to be really, really good based on an entire season a year ago in preventing big plays. So it's going to be strength against strength. We're the best team in the Big Ten last year in preventing big plays. And I don't doubt that at the end of this year, Ohio State will be probably #1 in making big plays. So strength against strength on that side of the ball. And in that regard, that's going to be a classic matchup to watch. Our defense versus a very explosive Ohio State offense. And maybe the difference in terms of advantage is we had 2 weeks to get ready for them, and they've had not as much time in preparing for us. That's one. Beyond that, I think I told a story. When I looked at an entire season of Big Ten play, turnover margin, edge on turnover margin, did not produce the usual low 80% winning percentage. This past year, it was only 72%. And I remember thinking, why did it tail off so much? If I had to give one reason for why it dropped, it was because of Ohio State. Ohio State was -1, I believe, in maybe as many as 4 games, and yet they still won the game. So the message there to our team, I hope, is +1 on our part might not be good enough. Let's strive to be +2 or +3. +2 in the Big Ten last year was 83% win. +3, which is hard to come by, was in fact 100% win. I think we can beat Ohio State with a +2 turnover margin. I'm not sure we can get it done with +1. So it's imperative that we generate turnovers and protect the ball on offense. And of course, run the ball, keep that explosive offense off the field, and be able to defend against explosive plays on the part of their offense. And it's not just passing game, it's running game also. That's the challenge, a huge challenge, but one I know that our players embrace. Just think of it this way. They've worked long and hard for this opportunity. They knew even before the season started, the odds are our best chance to make national news. There's only one team on our schedule that if we can pull it off, everybody's going to know about it in the entire country, and that's to knock off what was logically going to be a very highly ranked and very deserving Ohio State football team. That's where we are. Our guys are focused on getting that done. It's a tall order, but I would not want to bet against them.